Let's talk about Netflix's Worst Ex Ever Season 1, Episode 1. It's a crazy story. It is devastating. It is frightening. It has many, many mentions of domestic violence. So trigger warning, DV. And without further ado, let's just begin. Angie and Justine are very good friends, and they've been friends for 10 years. One day, Angie's mom gets a phone call from Justine, and she tells her that she needs to go to the hospital. And she doesn't say much else, and she hangs up. She also sounds very weak. So she calls her daughter. She's like, Angie, can you please check up on Justine? She sounded really strange. So Angie goes to Justine's house, notices that her door's locked. And that's odd, because she never locks her door. So immediately, Angie was thrown off. She tries opening the door and suddenly hears a scream, following 3 loud bangs. It kind of sounded like she was banging on the door to whoever was on the other side, like her, who was trying to open the door, to let them know that, hey, I'm in the house. I'm trying to get out. Please don't forget about me. That's what Angie felt like she was trying to do. So Angie calls 911. She hears another blood-curdling scream with more bangs. And she screams, Justine, I know you're in there. They're coming. I called the police. They're coming. Just hang in there, okay? Hang tight. Someone's going to get you out of there. So Angie, she's panicking. She runs over to the other side to see if there's any other way she can get inside the house, because all she's hearing is continuous screams and bangs. She sees a garage door and she's like, oh my God, it's probably not going to open. But she presses a button anyway and it opens. And as it opens, she runs towards the door. But Ben calmly walks outside. And Angie's like, Ben, where's Justine? And he says, she's having a heart attack. What? We need to get her to the hospital then. Why don't you go get her? And I'll get the car. And he calmly leaves the garage. Angie runs inside the house. Justine, I'm here. Where are you? And then she finds her on the floor, blood everywhere. She is horrified. She notices bruises all over Justine's body and then a noose around her neck. Angie's still on the phone with 911. She's begging them, please, please hurry, please, please. Oh my God, this guy, I know that guy, he has a really bad record of beating people. I'm pretty sure he did the same thing to someone else in Vegas. The ambulance and the officers arrive. Angie's crying, urging them to come over, help her friend. And she calls her other friend and she's like, hey, what's that guy's name that Justine was seeing? Benjamin Obadiah Foster. Justine and Ben had only been dating for a couple months. But before we get into their relationship, we have to go all the way back to 2012 and meet Amber. Amber is an ex-girlfriend of Ben's and they met in 2012 at work. They were both working for a day club on the strip, on the Las Vegas Strip, and he was a bartender and she was a server. They caught each other's eyes and they ended up in a relationship. On the outside, they actually looked perfect together because Ben is tall and handsome, he has dark features, and Amber is absolutely stunning. They dated for about a year and then they decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving in together. She noticed that Ben was more of a loner. He didn't really like being around too many people. And when they lived together, Amber started noticing little things like how he'd get jealous that she was talking to her ex-boyfriend. But it's not like she talked to him a whole bunch and they shared secrets and hung out all the time. No, she was helping him with his visa documents so that he could stay in the country. He was even dating someone else. It was so harmless. But Ben didn't like that. He started to feel uneasy. He'd say things to her in sort of like an accusatory way, but it never escalated. They never got into a screaming match over it. He didn't yell. It was just one of those things where she knew he was mad, and then that was it. Another red flag about him was, I guess it depends on where you're from and where you grew up, but he had an intense obsession for weapons. He loved knives, guns. He'd have an entire collection of them. He'd go to gun shows every single weekend because he wanted to, and she wasn't used to that. So she'd be like, oh my God, you really love guns. Like, why is that? And he was like, oh, I grew up in Oregon and that's just how I grew up. We grew up in the woods. We'd go hunting. So she chalked it up to, okay, well, I might not understand it, but that's a part of his upbringing. So I'm going to support him. But then one day he took one of his knives and as a joke, he kind of put it near her throat and mimicked the act of slitting her throat. And he was just like, ha 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 ha, wouldn't that be so funny? It's November 2014. They had been dating for 2 years now, and one day Ben just seemed a little off. He was very fidgety, he seemed tense, a little paranoid, and in order to break the tension, she kind of wanted to play a dumb little joke on him. And she told him that she threw away the new gun that he bought over the weekend. And something in him just snapped. He was so angry, and with full force, he slapped her across the face. He slapped her so hard that she fell down. She couldn't recognize him in that moment, and she was scared for her life. Like, she was in such shock. She got up, she grabbed her keys, and ran out the door. She drove to the police station. She filed a police report. They took her back to the house, they arrested him, and then he had to take domestic violence counseling and some community service along with a 2-month jail sentence. After he was released, he started stalking Amber. Now it's September 2015. Amber had plans to go to a football game with her friends, but it was a little colder than she had expected, so she needed to go get her jacket. So she drove back to her house that she shared with Ben. That's what the episode said, so I was kind of confused by what they meant. Maybe it's the same house that they used to live in, and now he doesn't live there anymore after they broke up, and she still does. So I don't know. That's what I'm assuming. And when she got to her house, she saw his car in the driveway. And he got out of his car as soon as she parked. He started stomping towards her car, screaming, yelling, throwing his hands. Her doors were locked. Thank God her windows were up. And he started banging his fist on her car. She started yelling, "You need to leave now. Get out of here, Ben." I don't know how long this went on for, but he eventually got back into his car and he left. Amber was obviously scared. What the hell just happened? Why is he here? Why is he so angry? So she waited in her car for about 15 minutes to make sure he didn't show back up again. And when she felt like it was safe enough to do so, she got out of her car, went into her house to get her jacket. As she entered her bedroom, somebody grabbed her by her hair and threw her to the ground. It was Ben. How the hell did he get in there, and when? He grabbed her again, threw her around, and he had a knife in his hand this time, and he went to slash her face. But she put her hand in front of her face just in time, and it sliced her pinky finger. He dragged her to the garage, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is a day. Like, I am going to die today." And that was it. He pinned her down. He started screaming, wailing, yelling at her. And I don't really know what the exact sequence of events were, but at some point, he got up to do something or to get something, so his back was turned, and she knew that was the one and only chance of anything. So she opened the garage door and she escaped. She ran to the leasing office and they called the police. By the time the police got to their house, it was squeaky clean. And she noticed that his face was bleeding. Like, where the hell did that come from? He told the officers that out of nowhere, Amber attacked him and cut his face. And that started the fight. And he just did whatever he could to protect himself. The officers went back to the leasing office, and after talking to them, they arrested Amber. Now, you guys have to realize Amber is bloody everywhere. She clearly has defensive wounds. She was covering her face and her head while Ben was beating her. And not only that, she made a domestic complaint before it was on file, and Ben went to jail for that offense, and he did community service, he went to jail, blah, 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 but they still arrested Amber. What the hell? They handcuffed her, threw her in the back of the car, right after she had been badly beaten by her ex-boyfriend. How does this even make sense? Well, eventually she learned that the police didn't even check Ben's record. They didn't even bother. If they had, they would have known that he had previous domestic violence charges. Well, thankfully, the judge found out and dismissed all the charges against Amber. So Amber was released, she goes home, and when she gets home, every single item of hers was missing. He had taken everything. We meet another ex-girlfriend, Jamie, and her dog, Maya. And they dated around September 2017. And surprisingly, Ben loved Maya. That's what initially attracted her to him, because he was so good with her dog. He was always playing with her, buying her toys, giving her treats, and she thought, oh my God, what a gem. She met Ben in a Krav Maga class and quickly became friends. She learned that he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he wasn't into partying, and she was like, God, he's like a little too good to be true. They had a casual relationship, kind of like friends with benefits. It didn't seem like he wanted anything serious, and even if he did, Jamie knew that he was still talking to his ex, Amber. So now in the episode, we see Amber on her living room sofa, and she gets a text message. Ding! She actually gets a series of text messages. Now, this is September 2017, and the last time she saw him was when he beat her in September 2015. So it's been 2 years, and she gets a series of text messages from Ben apologizing to her, telling her he's gone to therapy, and one of the steps in his healing journey is to make amends, reach out to all the people that he's hurt, and apologize. And then he asks her, can we please meet face to face to have a proper closure conversation? And she's like, okay, yeah, sure. Let's meet in a public place. And he said, okay, what about for dinner? And she said, okay, fine. So they meet at a restaurant, and he seems to be in a much better place. He was talking about his therapy sessions, everything he learned. He profusely apologized and said things like, oh, I can't believe everything that happened. I can't believe what I did to you. I would never do that to you. Like, I wish I never hurt you. You are the love of my life, and I would do anything to get you back. Amber felt his sincerity. She almost felt bad for him. She started to remember the man that she fell in love with, and look at him, he's working so hard. He seems so genuine, and she doesn't want to do anything to cause more harm or to cause more pain on him. This is something called Stockholm Syndrome, which is a psychological condition of a victim who identifies with and empathizes with their captor or abuser. So Amber and Ben end up keeping in touch, and eventually they even start dating again. Amber and Ben are spending Christmas Eve together, and they're in the living room, and she walks out for a second to get something, and she leaves her phone on the table with Ben. The next thing she knows, he's attacking her. He strangles her until she falls unconscious. When she gains consciousness, she finds Ben punching the wall while pacing around the room. Amber manages to escape by running and jumping out of her first floor balcony. She runs towards the first car she sees, and she sees it's a woman driving with a dog. And thankfully, that woman stopped her car and allowed Amber to get in. I'm not really sure what happened afterwards. There was supposed to be a trial, but it wasn't happening for a while. There was no urgency, so I'm not sure if that meant he was free roaming the streets in the meantime, free to stalk and beat and strangle whoever the hell he wanted to again. That wasn't clear. But Amber could not eat or sleep or do anything normally anymore. She was in a constant state of panic and paranoia and fear, wondering when and where the hell he'd jump out of and finally finish the job and end her life. Now it's September 2018. It's been a year since Jamie and Ben were friends. Unfortunately, he lost his job and he couldn't pay his rent anymore. So Jamie let him move into her place until he could get back up on his feet. Quickly after he moved in, he was sleeping all day. He wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't looking for jobs. And then eventually she had to tell him, dude, I can't keep letting you sleep on my couch. And I'm paying for your expenses. I'm running out of my savings. And he's like, okay, fine. I'll start looking for jobs. One day they were both home. Everything was fine, normal. And out of nowhere, Ben slammed Jamie to the ground. She was so confused. Why the hell did he just do that? And that was the first time he'd ever put his hands on her. And she was so confused and in a state of shock, and she just kind of brushed it off. A few weeks later, she kind of noticed that he was very, very paranoid. He kept talking about how there were people coming after him and he had to run away, he had to hide and get away. Now, another year has gone by. It's September 2019, and within the last year, Ben attacked Jamie several times in her home, each attack getting worse than the last. She didn't tell anyone, not her parents, not her friends, not her coworkers. She was embarrassed. She couldn't believe she was one of those girls who stayed in a DV relationship. It's so sad because she would check into a hotel during the weekdays because she was too scared to stay in her own home with him. And obviously he's not going to leave her house without a fight. So she'd spend all her hard-earned money to be at the hotel Monday through Fridays. And then when the weekend came, she couldn't afford the weekend prices. So she had no choice but to go home. Eventually, she mustered up the courage to go to the police and file a restraining order against him. They told Jamie that they were going to go to her place and serve him the papers, but if he didn't answer the door, that there was nothing they could do. Jamie's like, but that's my place. Everything I own is there. Can you at least escort me to my place so I can gather my belongings without getting beaten up? And they said no. Well, I was so confused when she said that they said no. Why did they say no? So the police go over there, they knock on her door, and surprise, surprise, he didn't answer. Of course he didn't. So they left the papers on her doorsteps and they just left. Jamie didn't know what to do. She's outside of her house contemplating whether or not to go inside. Is he inside? He probably is inside. He's probably hiding. If I go inside, he's probably going to beat me up. But what if he's not inside? And At this point, she is exhausted. She's mentally, physically, emotionally. She's just so exhausted. She has no money. She has no place to go, no one to tell. So she decides, okay, maybe he's not home. She goes inside her house and she looks around. There's no sign of Ben. So she walks into her room and she just passes out. When she wakes up, Ben is on top of her and he's shaving her head. He tells her, no man is ever going to want you again. The following 2 weeks, he held her captive in her own home. There was no food, no water. She tried to convince him one day to go to the store to get something for Maya the dog, because Maya had nothing else to eat. And it worked. He agreed. So he threw the car keys at her and said, you drive. As she's driving, her mind is going 100 miles a minute. How the hell is she supposed to get out of this situation? She pulls up into the parking lot and he tells her to stay in the car because he has to take Maya to pee. This was her only chance. She didn't want to leave Maya, but this was her only chance. So she ran into the store, begged a store employee, please, 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 do you guys have a secret room or an inside room that I can hide? Ma'am, I'm sorry, we don't have a room or office. Okay, do you have a back door? Yeah, we do over there. Jamie sees Ben walking towards the store with Maya and she runs as fast as she can. She runs out the back door and this man is in a car, okay? A different man, not Ben. And he approaches her and he's like, oh my God, miss, do you need help? Do you need to go to the hospital? And so he takes her to the hospital. Once Jamie's checked in at the hospital, the nurse calls the police and files a report.
Hi, this is Marie calling from Mountain View Emergency Room. I need to report an assault and a kidnapping kind of a thing.
Even though the police are there, Jamie's scared out of her mind. The last time she reached out to the police for help, they didn't do much. They couldn't even escort her to her home to prevent this exact situation from happening. The officer tells her, we want to help you, but in order to do so, we need to know his name. Jamie's terrified. She knows how this is going to go. She's been through this before. They're going to arrest him. He's going to be in jail for a couple hours, and then he's going to get released. And what's going to happen after that? He's going to find her and make sure she pays for running away. She's kind of put in an impossible situation. She tells the officers his name, he gets arrested again, and he was charged with the following: kidnapping first degree resulting in substantial bodily harm, coercion with force or threat of force, assault with use of deadly weapon, battery, which constitutes DV with substantial bodily harm, and domestic battery by strangulation. The next step was to go to trial, but Jamie refused. She did not want to relive her trauma, and honestly, she didn't understand why, with all the evidence that they had, the pictures of the bruises and the bloods and the cuts and the cigarette burns, why this had to go to trial in order for him to be punished. Was her badly beaten body not enough? Well, I guess it wasn't, because the DA cut him a deal since there was no victim who was willing to come forward and testify. So the DA took Jamie's case and combined it with Amber's case, and guess how long Ben was sentenced for? 30 months. They also said in the episode that he was given credit for 2 years that were already served. I don't know what that means. I was kind of confused, but ultimately he served 24 months and was released in October of 2021. I can't even imagine the terror, the horror, the fear that these women endured, knowing that once again, he was out and free. This brings us back to January 2023, the night he tortured, brutalized, beat, and almost killed Justine. So remember, her friend Angie found her, Ben left, and he's nowhere to be found. The authorities search and search, and they finally locate him at a family friend's house, but he spots them and escapes. When they searched inside that house, they found a small backpack that he left behind. It had his wallet, a bunch of cash, 3 phones that were all wrapped in tinfoil, a laptop, also wrapped in tinfoil, and an iPad, also wrapped in tinfoil. He was clearly very paranoid that he was being tracked. When they opened his phone, he had been on dating apps looking for more women. So the news decided to release his photos and to warn everybody to stay away from him. He's armed and he's very, very dangerous. Do not open your doors. Do not meet up with him if he approaches you on a dating app or any other way. Just stay away from him. He's very dangerous and he's on the run. While the manhunt is happening, Amber gets a phone call from Ben's brother, letting her know about the situation and that he's on the run and that he might be headed towards her. So to please be careful and to be on the lookout. He also apologized to her for not believing her. And now he believes her because of what just happened with Justine and that she might not make it out alive. Once Amber finds out that there is a manhunt, she's now worried that he might return to Vegas and come find her. On the 7th day of the manhunt, they got a tip from a cab company saying that someone named Richard Barron called in to request a ride. Now, I don't know how, but the cab driver knew that Ronald was supposed to be an older guy, and the guy on the phone sounded way too young. So he declined and called the police because the cab driver knew that there was a manhunt. The police went to Richard's house, who happened to be Tina's neighbor. I don't know if I mentioned her name earlier, but she was the family friend where Ben was hiding at her house. They found Richard dead on the living room floor along with his caretaker, Ronald. They had been badly beaten, and the way they were left told the officers that Ben had intended on burning their bodies. They search and search and search for Ben, and they finally come to the conclusion that he's most likely hiding in Justine's house. So they call the SWAT team. The house is surrounded with authorities. There are passerbys trying to see what's going on, and the officers are like, nope, you gotta go. Go, 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 go. They throw bombs in there. They shoot. They call. They're trying to get something out of him, but there's no response. Ben is dead silent. They get a search warrant to go inside the house with their dogs and with their drones, and they search the entire house, and Ben is not there. Are you kidding? Where the hell is this guy? The officers start to feel defeated. They're like, oh my God, where the hell is he? It's been 7 days. We cannot find him. But the dog starts leading them to the side of the house. He's sniffing and sniffing and sniffing. He's getting close to something. So the police look at where the dog is, and there is a small hidden window. They manage to open it and throw chemicals in there. And they put this robot thing with a camera under the house where he's hiding, and they see him laying down, hiding with the gun. They call out for him through the robot, but he still doesn't say anything. And then suddenly, boom, there's a gunshot sound. Ben shot himself and he died. Now you might be wondering what happened to Justine. She woke up from her coma and she was actually on the episode in front of the cameras, and I got chills during the scene. Not only is she alive, but she's able to speak and she shares her story. So basically, she and Ben were friends, and he was always so sweet to her and very caring. She never had any reason to question him until one day he asked her for a favor. He needed her urine to submit a urinalysis, and she's like, why do you need a urinalysis? And then he gave her some BS answer, but it didn't sit well with her. She just kind of like had that feeling, you know? She had a gut feeling something was off. So she did some research, and there she found out all the information about what he did to his ex-girlfriend Amber in Vegas. She was shocked, and she knew she needed to do something about it. So she went to work and she told her boss, like, you have hired this type of person. He beats women and he's been to jail for it and da-da-da-da. Which kind of made me question, like, why was a background check not done on him? Because that would have shown up, right? Or did the bar owner do the background check, find that information, and still hire him anyway? I guess we'll never know. Anyway, he fired Ben right on the spot, and Ben knew what happened. Ben knew that it was Justine who ratted him out and who got him fired. She immediately cut all ties with him. She stopped hanging out with him, stopped talking to him, unfollowed him on all social media. Just all forms of communication were cut. A month later, he was in her garage waiting for her to come home. And when she did, he attacked her. He held her hostage inside her house and beat her over and over and over again. I think they said it was day 3 when Angie came to her house and found her. She suffered a traumatic brain injury. She had to learn how to walk again. She had to learn how to talk again. And she had to get a whole new set of teeth because he knocked them all out. And that is the story of Worst Ex Ever, Season 1, Episode 1. Now, I tried to Google Benjamin Foster to find out more information about him, but I just couldn't find anything other than the coverage of the show. Remember, this happened fairly recently, January 2023, so it was last year. So I don't know if we're going to get more information about him, but there was an interesting part in the episode where the police were talking to the parents, and his parents were not nonchalant, but they were like, oh, we knew he'd get into some trouble someday. Oh, he might be in Vegas. I don't know. Like, I don't know. It was just so weird. But maybe they were in shock. I don't know. I just found it so infuriating how this happened over and over again. It makes me so mad how Amber was arrested after being beaten by her boyfriend. They did not even bother to do a background check on him. They didn't have to do much, just type in his name and they'll see the domestic violence record. And it also makes my blood boil knowing that the police did not help Jamie. Okay, first of all, how did he only serve 24 months after brutally beating and kidnapping his ex-girlfriends? What the fuck? Like, seriously, what the fuck? I feel so bad for these women. And I don't know how one heals from that trauma. Anyway, that is a recap of Netflix's Worst Ex Ever, Season 1, Episode 1. I highly recommend you watch the episode. It's different when you see the actual victims and survivors telling the stories, and it's just, it'll make you so mad how they weren't listened to, and they weren't believed, and they weren't supported. Well, that's it for the recap. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye!